Hi, Dave again, and in this, my second video on Esperanto literature, I want to discuss translations from national languages into Esperanto. In addition to the interesting body of original content, there's quite a large amount of books that were translations from national languages into Esperanto. And the interesting thing about it is that of course, in almost every case, if you speak Esperanto, it's because you chose to learn it. There are very few native speakers, though they do exist. As I mentioned in my previous video, the famous investor George Soros is a native speaker. He learned it as a child from his parents. But since most people have to make the choice to learn Esperanto, usually what tends to happen is that the translations into Esperanto tend to be made by native speakers of that language. And I'm not sure how true that is for other languages. Like, for example, are most English translations made by native English speakers that only learned the language that they're translating from as a second language? So the reverse of the Esperanto case. I don't know. I've heard that cited a lot on Esperanto websites, and it sounds interesting, and it's a valid point, but I honestly I don't know how true it is, though it's interesting to think about. But in addition to that, it's also interesting to note that in Esperanto, these translated works represent much better the smaller national languages. I'll take, for example, some of the books I recently purchased on eBay. I purchased a lot of about 30 or 40 books in bulk from eBay, and I ended up with 6 books that were original Estonian works that were translated by an Estonian woman into Esperanto. Here's another one. I haven't read any of these yet, but it's interesting that it's something I didn't really even consider existed. I mean, it's funny to say it like that, but there may be copious and very high quality translations of Estonian poetry into English, but I don't see them anywhere in the bookstore, and I don't hear anything about them, and I will hasten to guess that 90% of English speakers in the world have never even considered that Estonia has a literature. But it's quite easy to bump across Esperanto translations of this sort of material. Let's see, I have a few more around here. Also I've got this Japanese anthology, which is a pretty widely spoken literary language, so that's not all that unusual, but these sorts of anthologies are really common, I've noticed as well. And by the way, I should stress that these anthologies tend not to have original Esperanto content, so it's not necessarily full of material composed by Japanese Esperantists, but rather material that's been translated from Japanese into Esperanto by Japanese-speaking Esperantists, if that made sense. And they have these for quite a lot of smaller languages. That I've seen some for Slovenian, Romanian, for example. I also have the English one, of course, which isn't really that big of a deal. I ended up, this one cost me less than $10 online, and many of the translators are very well-known Esperantists, such as William Auld, for example, or Rossetti is in here as well. So that was worth picking up. And then, of course, I've got the obligatory J.R.R. Tolkien, The Hobbit. You gotta have that, right? And that was very affordable. And here's another one of my another one of my anthologies from Bulgaria. Another literature I hadn't considered to read until I learned Esperanto. And then in addition to that, there's just a wealth of original Esperanto stuff as well. And let me show you a couple of books I have from that, just to give you an idea of what I might be talking about. in some of my upcoming videos. I've got this book by Raymond Schwartz, who I haven't read anything by him yet, but he's always talked about it as a very funny guy, a humorist, with lots of Esperanto puns and that sort of thing. So I'm looking forward to that. I've got, this is actually the first real, quote-unquote, real Esperanto book I read after studying the language, grammar, and textbook for a while. It's by a man named Julio Bagi. In my last video, I talked about George Soros' dad, who composed two World War memoirs about his experiences, and this book is a similar sort of thing. Julio Bagi was in a prison camp in Siberia during World War I, and he wrote two books about it. This one, Victimoi, and this one, Sur Sangatero, which is the sequel to that. And I believe they're fictionalized accounts. It's not a memoir per se, but it's based on his experiences, and that's pretty interesting. I'll do a video, since I've read this one. Maybe my next video will be a review specifically of this one, or I'll give you a summary of it and so on. I also have Marjorie Bolton, is an accomplished English Esperantist, and I have a book of her. These actually are some dramas that she wrote, stage dramas, but she's also a well-known poet. And I have two Zafmari books. There's Machine Mondo, which this is a collection of short stories, and I have Voyaggio al Casohinio as well, and this is also a sci-fi kind of novel. This is kind of like the Esperanto Gulliver's Travels, if you will, and he's supposed to be a very good writer as well. I've started the Voyaggio, and that's pretty good. It's pretty good, and I'll do a video on that shortly as well. The last two books I want to show you really quickly are essentially Esperanto versions of the encyclopedia I showed in my first video. So on my first video, you'll recall the original Literature of Esperanto encyclopedia is written in English, which sounds a little funny that it's about Esperanto but it's written in English, which is great if you don't speak the language. If you do speak the language and you want to follow up to that, this is a great book, the Gvidlibro por supera exameno, guidebook for super understanding, is the translation. This is split into a couple of sections. The first section is a history of the planned languages. So it starts from the first instances of planned languages all the way up into Esperanto, and it's an interesting read. There's also a section on the Esperanto movement itself, which that read is a little bit dry, and then the final section is a smallish encyclopedia, just like the other one, only written in Esperanto, where it talks about the different writers and a little bit about them. And a companion piece to that is this Crestomatio, which is you can basically read it along with the Gvidlibro at the same time, and it's a little anthology of the different writers, and it gives some poetry and prose excerpts and stuff, which you can read in tandem with the Esperanto guidebook. So I hope that's a good overview. Maybe my next video I'll review Julio Bagi's Victimoi for you, and I will see you soon.